So let me just show you another picture. These are pictures put out by imagery analyst Damien Simon, who goes by the name Deterrence on social media. He's put out this map, which actually gives you a sense. Blue is India, red is China, which gives you a sense of the kind of permanent structures that exist along the line of actual control, including in the Depsang area in the north and the Demchok area in the south. You know, you've seen the tentative disengagement of troops on the actual border, right on the LAC, but these dots you see on this picture, on this map, really show you how many permanent structures have actually been built on both sides. And removing those structures is not part of the current agreement, and therefore it's going to be a far bigger challenge to actually de-escalate and then de-induct. What happens, for instance, to all these permanent structures is a big question that we need to ask. In addition to all these questions, the big questions I'm asking right now is that when will troop patrols resume on both sides? Now that the disengagement is completed, the first phase of the disengagement, when will troop patrols resume on both sides? Number two, will there be new joint border protocols between India and China, given that the old protocols have proven to be pretty much redundant, with the two countries nearly coming to war over the last 4 years? Number three, tents and troops have been pulled back as part of this tentative agreement. But what about those permanent posts a few kilometers inside that I just showed you on the map and that Ankit was referring to? Those numbers have increased in the last 4 years. Will India and China dismantle that permanent infrastructure at the line of actual control? Could that be something that's on the table for discussion going forward? Question number five, can the Indian Army deter any Chinese U-turn on disengagement? Remember that China is a country that has very little predictability and almost zero trust as far as India is concerned. So what kind of deterrence will ensure that the Chinese do not make a U-turn on this disengagement? And number six, will India and China shift their firepower from the front? Many of those dots you saw on that map represented not just permanent establishments, troop accommodations, heliports and things like that, but also firepower, tanks, artillery, radars, missile sites, etc. When will those be moved back? And until those are moved back, can this really be called a meaningful disengagement is the larger question. So no over-exaggerations or exuberance. This is a sober look at what the reality is, even as we welcome a disengagement between both sides in Depsang and Demchok. Let's go straight to our big experts now to talk about this. First to General S.L. Narasimhan and Col Dinny we'll go to right after. General Narasimhan, the disengagement in Depsang is, as we said in our last conversation, welcome news. Any forward movement as far as India and China is concerned is welcome news. But the reality of the matter is that the Chinese side, the Indian side as well, but the Chinese side especially, has accelerated the building of permanent structures, permanent infrastructure in Depsang, Demchok, and in the other areas. And the current agreement doesn't talk about the removing of those.
Good evening, Shiv. Thanks for getting me onto your show.
Thank you.
You see, two, three things. One is, I just before I answer your question in a second, first thing is I heard you referring to these areas as buffer zones. I think I actually agreed upon temporary moratorium on patrolling in these areas. So these are two different connotations that we need to be looking into. The use of word buffer zone is conveys something else, which is not a correct way of expressing.
Understood.
Second is about your question about the firepower, the permanent structures, etc. See, the disengagement typically was meant to pull the troops back to a little bit so that they don't come face to face, and then things could escalate if it gets heated up a little bit somewhere in between. So this is the first process that has been completed, as we spoke on the show sometime earlier this week.
Yeah.
The issue is this, that the first step is being completed at this point in time. The permanent structures, the pulling back of the firepower, the missile structures that have come up, the permanent structures that have come up, that I am sure will be part of the de-escalation process, and that will come up for further discussions in the next stage. The patrolling to recommence. I think it can recommence at any point in time once this verification process is completed. And I'm sure the modalities have been already worked out in that agreement, which had been signed earlier. And I'm sure it'll start very, very soon. Maybe in a 2-3 days time, we'll be able to start that patrolling from both the sides. What has been told is that it is a coordinated patrolling, which means both the patrols will not come face to face. And that is a good sign, basically, because then there is no chance of escalation, face-offs, and then escalation of those face-offs thereafter. So this is the first step, which has generally been completed. We'll have to wait for the second step to start, and then it's a good step forward. Like you said in your initial remarks, we need to be careful. We need to verify the pullbacks that have happened, and then get on to the other processes for the step 2, which has to come up anytime soon.
Can you tell us what this verification process will look like in terms of the the instruments that the Indian Army and the Chinese Army will be using to verify? It isn't being left to each other to put on paper that they've done so and so, pull back, etc. This will actually be a cross verification exercise, General, with satellites and UAVs and things like that. Can you tell us how it's done?
You're very right. It can't be just left to people say, I've done it. So therefore, you need to have other processes. You're right. The UAVs will be used. The satellite pictures will be used. The physical verification of these things definitely will be carried out before we take a step forward. As I have been saying in all the programs, trust but verify. We need to verify those things which have happened on ground. And I think that is the step that we need to be taking. And I'm sure people are already taking those steps.
The third question I want to ask you, General, is that are there going to be new protocols now? Because, the last 4.5 years has pretty much changed everything as far as the rules of engagement between the two sides are concerned. And at the very least, it has shown that the existing protocols are not enough to prevent a situation of this kind. Even though we know very well that it was China that violated those protocols, does this mean that the two sides will now have to evolve some special new protocols to follow?
You see, the protocols were already there, as I've been saying earlier also. The protocols were already there. You find agreements there. You find the standard operating procedures there. All of them got violated on one fine day in 2020. So therefore, bringing in another new one may or may not be a very wise thing to do, because it all depends on how the other side actually respects those. So what I think we need to do, it has already been done, I am aware, that the existing protocols have to be revisited and see how they need to be tightened up, and that process was already on. As far as this particular issue is concerned about the coordinated patrolling and other things, those are the protocols which already come in with this agreement happening. So I don't think we need to go for more new protocols to come up again and again. I think we need to tighten up the existing protocols which are existing, plus take on board the agreement that has been done and the acceptance of certain rules and regulations which has been agreed upon in that agreement.
Final question, General Narasimhan, is that considering that China has proven to be a country that is not reliable, as a result of which all these verifications really need to happen, is there some deterrent? In the last 4 years, has there been some kind of a message that the Indian Army has been able to send to China, which says that, if you go back on your word, or if there are U-turns on agreements, then there will be a price to pay? I'm asking this in a simplistic way, but I mean that even in this agreement now, this latest agreement for this disengagement in Depsang and Demchok, if there is some kind of a rethink or a U-turn at the Chinese level, on what has been agreed to, is there some kind of a deterrent on the Indian side, sir?
It is like this. When these protocols have been agreed by both the sides, we expect them to be followed in letter and spirit. Okay. In the last 4.5 years, one point has gone continuously to the Chinese side, that the status of the border will determine the status of the relationship. This is a standard line which has been conveyed to them, both at track 1, track 1.5, track 2 level, all levels it has been conveyed, in every meeting that has been conveyed. So I think the unified kind of stand that we took, and the perseverance that we practiced in last 4.5 years has, I think, paid the dividends as we see it at this point in time. But be rest assured, should there be a U-turn by the Chinese, I am sure our troops are very well there. They are very well deployed. And then I'm sure they'll take care of the situation if at all it comes.
In fact, I agree, because I don't think that the situation is ever going to be normal again. I don't think trust is ever going to be a real factor. It's going to be about mutual deterrence and perhaps the assurance of the consequences in case any such U-turns are even contemplated. General S.L. Narasimhan, always a pleasure speaking to you and getting your wisdom on this complicated issue. I thank you very much for being guest number one on this topic. Thank you very much, sir. And now bringing in Colonel Dinny, who also offers perspective as someone who until just a few years ago was a commanding officer on the front line. So this allows us to zoom in to the LAC to tell you about what will actually be happening on the ground now. Colonel Dinny, you've been in this situation. During the standoff, so you know what the atmosphere was like between the Indian side and the Chinese side. Could you give us a sense of what it would be like for the army forces in Depsang right now as they carry out this disengagement?
First and foremost, Shiv, the first thing is that they would be cautious, because as General Narasimhan also mentioned, that it's the trust, but verify is the mantra. So yes, the troops will be cautious, and I dare say that it will be cautious from both sides, because there is no trust at this point of time. So whatever actions earlier, which used to be done as a matter of routine, would now be done as a proper operation. Each thing will be done in a manner which will be planned to the last T, and it will be done in a manner that there is no scope for any ambiguity. So whether it is moving back, what is the time to move back? Which all infrastructure has to be taken from there at the first round, which will be done in the second round, and then finally, how do we move? Because it has to be synchronized with what the Chinese also is doing. So I think there will be a lot of planning, and I'm sure the people on ground, they will do that. I mean, because it is something which if they are all professional soldiers, they know exactly what to do, and the key point is it will be a reflection of how the Chinese take the things forward, because there will be an agreement which has been reached, but on ground to implement it will be done in a manner because this is where, if you remember, in Galwan, the Chinese backtracked, and what happened there was something else. So therefore, I would say that it will be done with a lot of caution, but in a professional manner and in sync with what the Chinese does.
We know that directions are being sent from the military headquarters to the units on the ground, the corps headquarters, etc., to the units on the ground on both sides, as far as this disengagement is concerned, Colonel Dinny. But on the ground in Depsang, and I'm just asking this because, these are questions that our viewers would also like to know about, is would the sides be talking to each other in Depsang and Demchok during this disengagement? Would there be like a hotline between the units there?
Definitely. See, what happens is that all along the line of actual control, there has always been a system of contact at the tactical level, at the battalion commanders level and at the brigade commanders level. More at the brigade commanders level. And
you've also been in touch with your counterpart on the other side when you were there.
Through the brigade. Okay. Yes, through the brigade, we were in touch. So therefore, for example, if there is a violation, a transgression happens, immediately a call is given to the other side that this has happened. Now we want a flag meeting immediately. So then they reciprocate the date and time is fixed. So there is a mechanism, as General Narasimhan was mentioning, within the existing protocols, that there is a mechanism to get in touch. So I'm sure that mechanism still continues to be in Depsang as well. So whatever we are doing and whatever they are doing, as part of the agreement, there will be mutual exchange of information that this is what we are doing right now. This is the number of troops which are going to go. This is the number of tents which are going to go. So those communication is definitely, I'm sure it will be happening at the ground level.
As a battalion commander who's been in a frontline position during this standoff, Colonel Dinny, can you tell us what this kind of disengagement does in terms of lowering the temperatures between the two sides? Can you give us a realistic picture of that? The pullback of troops, removal of some of these tents which are in somewhat of an eyeball-to-eyeball situation. it appears that it would bring down the temperatures because, there is a visible movement. But as a battalion commander, can you tell us, can you confirm that that is the case? It does bring down temperatures and diffuses things somewhat?
Oh, absolutely, Shiv. See, when you look at it, these frontline troops, right along the line of actual control, they, no matter what kind of structures they are not having the same kind of I would say amenities or the comfort as would maybe even in the forward bases, because
Correct.
these are after all temporary bases. So as a commanding officer, you don't want your troops to be exposed to the elements, which is one of the biggest challenges in these areas for a prolonged time. So in that sense, when both sides disengage, as a commanding officer, you are happy that your troops are now coming back to a much more secure place where you have a better command and control, and where the troops' health and other issues can be taken care of. So therefore, that adds to the overall lowering of the temperature, because all said and done, Shiv, when troops are in close contact for a prolonged time, you never know what goes into their mind, and where somebody can of course then at this point of time there is no physical contact because there is no patrolling. But
Correct.
once the patrolling starts, at that point of time, it is very difficult to control the emotions of a soldier. And I say it goes for the same thing goes for the Chinese also. To control all the people who are going for patrol, the officers, young officers who are going. So it's very difficult. So as a commanding officer, one is happy that the troops are coming back to your fold, where you have better command and control, you have better facilities available, and they can be engaged in much more productive training and much other activities. So yes, definitely the temperature will come down in that sense.
Colonel Dinny, you started answering the question that I was going to ask you next, so I'll jump straight to that, which is on the patrolling aspect of it. Some of the videos that came out during the standoff did depict, clashes and violence during those patrols crossing each other in the Pangong sector where you served as well. As we talk now about the resumption of patrolling, and after this 4.5-year standoff in which it is very clear which side had violated protocols and which side had, very strictly obeyed protocols. We all know that the Indian army didn't do that. It was the Chinese army that did it. How difficult is it going to be to resume patrolling? The reason I'm asking is because, our soldiers, our officers will have to now go on those patrols again. But absolutely, the Indian Army is a highly professional force. Everyone has complete faith in them. But it's going to be difficult getting back to something where the trust in the other side has completely gone.
Oh, absolutely, Shiv. I think in this whole process of normalization along the line of actual control, if you want me to name one issue which is the most critical and yet which is the most challenging, I would put it as the patrolling which is going to happen now. And especially in the area what is generally commonly referred as buffer zone, but I also call it as no patrolling zones.
Yes.
So what happens in the no patrolling zone is going to dictate how the peace and tranquility along the line of actual control will sustain itself, because that is where this entire problem started.
Correct.
So it is not the infrastructure which was created in the decked areas and in other issues, but the physical contact between the troops led to this crisis or to this conflict. So I am, concerned that once this starts again, how do we, overcome that, so that those incidents do not come back again? There, I understand that there is an agreement now being worked out, wherein prior information would be given, the number of troops would be, restricted. So and also there will be no overlapping of patrols. Like if once the Indian patrol goes, then on the same day the Chinese will not come, and vice versa. That I think will, to a great extent, will reduce the tension. But definitely, as an officer, as a soldier, infantry soldier, as I mentioned, it is not you're not dealing with machines there. You're dealing with human beings.
Correct.
And human beings at that altitude, they with extreme pressure and stress, both from the environment and otherwise, can behave in a very different manner. And one has seen it. It is not because of any lack of professionalism. And I do agree that even the Chinese side, to be very to be fair to them, it is not that they also behave in an unprofessional manner. They do behave in a professional manner, but of course they have to do what they are supposed to do. What are they told to do? That counter is being given by the Indian side. So what I can say is, Shiv, the patrolling in the no patrolling zone would dictate how much peace and tranquility, or how long this can sustain. That is going to be the key, I think.
And that is the point at which we now stand, because with this disengagement tentatively complete, the next step will be on the resumption of that very challenging area of patrolling. And as Colonel Dinny has just pointed out, that is going to be trickier than it sounds. So we'll have to see how the two sides actually navigate it and resume patrolling in especially those 2 points, but also the buffer zones or the no patrolling zones of the other friction points that began in May 2020. Colonel Dinny, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for giving us that very gritty, granular take on what it's going to be like navigating the next few steps. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.